Thank you very much for joining us, Mr. Kofinas. Now, the pictures we've been getting today have been getting steadily more violent, and this is not the first protest, definitely by the Greeks. Well, can you give us an idea just how strong the opposition is right now?
Well, as you see, they're much worse than they were on the 15th of June, and as far as I've seen, they're much worse than anything we've seen before. The police got extremely violent. They tear gassed a lot of the people in the Platea Syntagmatos, in Constitution Square. So. Yeah, it's gotten pretty bad, and I wouldn't say that all these protesters represent anywhere near the Greek population. It's really typically the anarchists and the provocateurs that start these types of problems. We don't have these unless we have votes.
All right, correct me if I'm wrong, but from what we're seeing, many of the protesters appear to be young people, and they'll be bearing the brunt of bailout interest payments for decades to come. Now, even if the vote passes, will they accept the new austerity measures?
No, of course not. I mean, no one wants these austerity measures. Even people who aren't in the public, even people that are in the private sector, who don't stand to lose specifically from the austerity measures, they're not a fan of these measures because it's not just about cutting the public sector. It's also about privatizing, liquidating the nation, liquidating the national assets, selling off public companies at liquidation prices, and collateralizing national assets, national resources. So, of course, they're not going to stand for it. It doesn't offer anyone any kind of future here.
Okay, well, if they're not going to accept it, and the government seems to be keen on still pushing for getting an EU bailout, what's the deciding factor here? Where is it tipping towards at this point?
Unfortunately, the government isn't giving anyone any real options, and that's the problem. The austerity measures are unpopular, widely unpopular amongst everyone in this country, but at the same time, they're not giving us any real solutions. They're just giving us threats. You have our VP who came out yesterday, I think it was, and he spoke to El Mundo, and he said that if we have a default and return to drachma, it would be chaos. We'd have tanks in the street. And he may be right, but that's only because this government isn't providing a real solution. So the way I see it as it stands right now, default is an inevitable option, and people recognize that here, and they're saying if we're going to default, why should we default today? Why should we default a year or two from now when we don't have any assets left to salvage? Why not default now, return to the drachma in a chaotic environment, maybe use the euros for private transactions here, but default now and save yourself the liquidation.
Okay, let's just look at what the government is doing. Just a week ago, the Greek Prime Minister offered to resign, and that was rejected, to pass leadership to a rival. Now, does the government itself even believe another bailout will work, provided they're not giving other options for you guys now?
No, I don't think that they're interested in whether a bailout's going to work or not. I don't think that was their interest from the beginning. If they were interested in having a bailout that could work, maybe they would have tried to work out a deal with Russia and China. They have plenty of reserves. No, I don't think that they're concerned about the bailout working. I think they're concerned about fulfilling the wishes of the Troika, and they're doing that right now. They're achieving anyone and I've made this point before. Anyone who's interested in receiving interest payments for their debt, they're not doing what they should be doing. What they're achieving is liquidation of assets, and anything else is going to come out of the EFSF and from the IMF.
Okay, you're mentioning liquidation of assets. It's true, the austerity laws being debated by Parliament will compel the government to sell critical state assets. But again, they offer no guarantees that the bailout will work. You've talked about it a little bit earlier. So will it be like a house of cards just falling then?
Yeah, no, the bailout can't possibly work because you've got a deflation going on while you're increasing the total debt load. There's no way this government or the people of Greece can possibly pay this debt back. And that's why the primary interest is on the primary budget deficit, because they're interested in getting the country to a point where the only thing that we're running a deficit for is interest payments. So it's not going to work. Is it going to collapse like a house of cards? Yeah, I mean, I think that the only way for this to move forward is to have a pure default. I don't see other solutions being implemented because you don't have willing parties that want to participate.
Okay, well, looking at how the Greeks perceive the EU now, the crisis and the response from the EU, how has this affected the Greeks' public perception of the European Union? What do they feel towards it?
I mean, people have always been skeptical, not just here in Greece, but in other countries, because with the introduction of the euro, that coincided with hard times, and with higher prices. And that's not entirely the fault of the euro per se, but I think people are becoming more nostalgic for the time of the drachma. And it's not to say that the drachma is going to solve the problems here, but at least with the drachma, you eat up the debt with inflation, If you can't control the government spending, which is what we were hoping we would achieve with the introduction of the euro, we would have low inflation and low government spending. Instead, we had low inflation and high government spending, so we had massive amounts of debt. I think that people are fed up with the EU here in general. That's the major feeling, and they want a return to some sort of national autonomy where they can implement a policy that benefits them. Because right now, they understand that they're under a financial occupation, which is what this is, and they're not going to be able to get out of it as long as the EU, the EC, and the Troika are working together to bankrupt this country.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Demetri Kofinas, financial journalist, talking to us from Athens. There. Thank you.